You're listening to Elevate, the official podcast of Elite Agent for real estate industry sales professionals, property managers, and leaders. Each episode, we bring you the best minds in business and real estate to help you list more, sell more, and elevate your results. To connect with all things Elite Agent, including the latest news, coaching, and features, subscribe at our website, eliteagent.com.
Welcome to another episode of the Elevate podcast, where we get some of the most interesting people in business and real estate to reveal some of their growth strategies that you can learn from to elevate your business. Today, we have a bit of a different episode. I'm Samantha McLean as usual, and I've got with me Mark Edwards.
Hey Sam, how's it going?
Very well, thank you. And today we've been working up to this for a while, haven't we?
We have.
Of you actually hanging around for the whole show.
as opposed to just sitting here and doing the intro and then buggering off. So we thought we'd introduce some podcasts which were about how we've built things within Elite Agent, because it's quite interesting, because I think moving into 2020, real estate agents definitely need to be behaving more and more like digital marketers. I think in the current issue of the magazine, Ellen Bathgate, who is a specialist in starting rent rolls, said that there are certain things that are working and certain things that aren't. So what she's seeing is that letterbox dropping is perhaps not working so well anymore. And I think we've seen in influencers as well, the people who are good online are the people who are attracting the greatest followings. Yeah.
And so what some people might not know about what we do is that when someone subscribes to Elite Agent, it goes to a thank you page. Everyone should have a thank you page, by the way. And it's this little video of me saying, thanks for joining the tribe, number one. And if there was any problem I could solve for you, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but if there's any problem I can solve for you, what is it? And how hard has it been to solve? And this is anonymous, so you don't have to put your name or anything like that in. Like, I actually sort of want people to be honest about what it is we can do as a lead agent to help solve these problems in real estate and elevate the industry, as is our brand promise in this podcast. So one of those topics, obviously, was about building databases. And so I wrote an article on that a couple of months ago, 29 ideas for real estate agents to grow your database. But then we got another question, didn't we? And that question was, if I have a big database, does that automatically mean more listings?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? It's the whole quantity over quality.
Well, yeah, it is. So I do think you need to build a database, but I think we need to differentiate that. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is we're going to talk about building an audience as opposed to building a database, because you build an audience first. And that's something that we've done over the last 5 years and have a fair bit of experience in, is building an audience. And then, you know, how does that audience go through the funnel from audience to database
to customer?
Yep. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
So let's jump straight into this. What sort of tools do you need to build a database, or to build an audience, to build the database, to build your clients? The
number one question that, you know, I keep hearing in circles a lot is about what CRM system will do the job. And the answer is any CRM system will do the job.
Any CRM system is better than no CRM system.
Yeah, but what I would like to differentiate between is CRM systems and email systems. Because generally when you're building a database, you want to capture people's email address. Because if you could think about it as personal space, like if someone gives you their email address, they're letting you into their very personal space. And that's interesting, but they're not going to become a customer. So there are a lot of agents that will say, pen and paper, 15 names, these are the people I'm dealing with. They are your hot prospects. But you want to be gathering email addresses, say in an email address program, before they get to your real estate specific CRM system. So I think any CRM system will do the job, so long as you've got a CRM system. There are some great mail programs out there at the moment. Obviously, MailChimp has been around for ages. We use ActiveCampaign, don't we?
We do, and we've also played with Infusionsoft as well. So I think Confusionsoft. But any of these things will just enable you to turn your audience into people in your database and then convert them to
paying customers.
And
I think it's really important in property management, you know, investors, for example, you know, like you want to attract investors, and you attract investors through things like LinkedIn and through, you know, website search traffic and things like that. You want to grab their email address on your website, preferably, and then nurture them into a face-to-face meeting or something like that. This has been a real takeaway for us over the last couple of years, is that you need to be able to segment people, and that's why we chose ActiveCampaign over some of the other products. Like, we did have a bit of a laugh about Infusionsoft. It's not called Infusionsoft anymore. It's called Keep.
Infusionsoft by Keep.
Yeah. And, you know, it was really good for segmenting and e-commerce and things like that, but it was very difficult. And the email builder was very difficult to use. Whereas with ActiveCampaign, you know, this is going into 2020. These are the things that you're going to need to remember is when you're building a database, you want to be able to segment people. Like, you want to be able to talk to investors like investors. You want to talk to people who are vendors like vendors. You want to talk to people who are buyers like buyers. And you want to be able to do a combination of those things. So the way that I always describe this is it's a really great way for knowing people and knowing how to speak to them, whether it's online, offline, or whatever. I had an example with Telstra, which is something I you know, when people ask me to speak at their events, often I refer to this example is that, you know, I've got an iPad and I've got a phone, but I am a customer of Telstra. And so I lost my iPad earlier this year. I didn't lose it, actually. I broke it. I dropped it.
It did not bounce, people.
Yeah, it didn't. iPads don't bounce. I don't recommend dropping them. Anyway, so I got onto the chat with Telstra and gave them my mobile phone because that's my customer number is attached to actually my iPhone. And then they asked me, they said, so what's your iPad mobile number? And I'm like,
how would you know?
Yeah, well, number one, nobody calls that because I am your customer, you should know. Yep. And that's what we're sort of saying about this database thing is that you want to start with a view of having one view of the customer. So we know, for example, you know, from articles that people click on and stuff like that, whether they're really interested in property management or whether they're really interested in leadership or whether they're interested in something else. And you're
building that avatar of that person. I'd also probably like to challenge that a little bit as well, in that not necessarily one size doesn't fit all requirements. So even in our environment, from an email perspective, ActiveCampaign is what we use, you know, sort of every single day. It used to be MailChimp. From a sales perspective, talking to our advertisers and to our commercial partners, the sales team here uses Pipedrive.
Yeah.
And for magazine subscribers, you know, so we're still sort of like sitting with those on Infusionsoft. Yeah. So one size doesn't necessarily fit all requirements. And that's something to keep in mind, in that you can't try and cram everybody into the one solution if it doesn't make sense for them to be there.
Yeah, just so long as you've got a single view of that customer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Which is where clever technology people come in. But the original question was, should you build a large database? What are the pros and cons? And I reckon there's an 80-20 in your database. So you can build a large database, and the 80-20 rule says that
20% of those people in your database are going to be the most engaged people that you're going to be wanting to talk to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I think there are pros and cons. And also, like, from working with Claudio for years and years and years, and some of the other top coaches, they will always say, you don't need a farm area any bigger if you're in sales and say, you know, 11 to 1,200 homes. Because if you have more than that, you know, you're diluting yourself and you can't get to know that area as well. It
becomes very difficult to be the specialist in that area if you're such a generalist over a larger area.
Yeah, exactly. And so do you need to build a large database? Well, yes, because you want word of mouth from other people, other influencers, to talk to those people in that farm area of yours. For example, you know, like I heard someone the other day say, well, every other day we always hear someone say print is dead. But then what might happen is that if you've got a younger demographic in your area, parents read print. And so they're not somebody that you want to be talking to inadvertently every day of the week.
Yep.
But they are influencers perhaps on your local area. And so this is where having a big audience is useful, where you might be in actual fact working with a much smaller database. And I just want to make that distinction between audience and database.
So there are so many different ways of reaching people these days, you know, email, SMS, letterbox drops, social media and so forth. And I suppose that gets back to the point is people want to be communicated in the way in which they like to receive or absorb their information. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing at the moment and how agents should be, or agents, PMs, BDM should be using that information or using the tools that they've got available to them.
First of all, I think that before you start putting pen to paper, there's a few questions that you need to be able to answer. One is, who are your audience? And I would start as a marketer in creating a persona. You know, who is it that I'm talking to? What age group? What do they like to do? Where do they hang out? And actually give that person a name and then talk to that person. So, for example, with the brief, we are fortunate enough to know a lot of agents quite well. And so often we'll run something through a filter of, would so-and-so appreciate this, or would so-and-so want to know this? And so I'm actually always thinking of who is the person behind what I'm communicating. Secondly, and I can't stress this enough, is every piece of communication that you have, you need to run through a simple filter of know, feel, do. What do you want them to know? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do? Meatloaf said 2 out of 3 ain't bad, but that's not the case. Every piece of marketing communication, you need to have those 3 things. And even if you're trying to write something, if you're trying to write a blog post, if you're trying to write an email, start with those 3 things. What do you want them to know? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do?
And that can extend across all of these various communication types we were just mentioning, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what's working? So, as I said, email is a sacred place. Email works, but I think a lot of people don't do it well. And so I'll talk about a few ways that you can think about doing it well in a second. SMS, it works well if you're working with a younger demographic, a younger generation, because they're always on their phones. Letterbox drops, I still think that perhaps letterbox drops have a place in marketing these days, but I think the letterbox drop has to be of value. You know, we get a lot of things in our letterbox too at home, don't we? Because North Sydney is a competitive area for real estate agents. There's a lot of real estate agents in this area, and we happen to live in a big block of apartments. So generally our letterbox is full. And that should tell you something. We'll open the letterbox on any given day and there'll be 3 or 4 pieces of communication from an agent in the letterbox.
Yep.
And so what stands out? I'm going to say nothing.
To be completely
to
honest,
be brutal,
they all look
nothing.
very, very similar.
Yeah, and it's all about the person, not about something that I might be interested in. And I know that's probably a harsh lesson, and that's why I think letterbox drops are not working so well these days, and why Ellen's kind of said in her article that they haven't worked so well. I think they probably would work better if they were more focused on who you're trying to talk to rather than the selfish kind of marketing.
So the sort of thing that would catch my eye in the letterbox would be, we know that, you know, sort of across the road from us, there's a commercial building that's going to be redeveloped by Aqualand into a big massive residential sort of things. Nobody is talking about what that means for the area, what's going to be going on, you know, so how that will affect housing prices and so forth. I think the trap people get into is create one piece of content, print it a bazillion times and hope it's going to stick. As opposed to, if I was an agent in this area, I would probably draw an invisible boundary of 500 metres around that area and create a piece that's going to be relevant for residents in that area. So that would be the sort of thing that people have got opportunities to become hyper local in their marketing, as opposed to the broad stroke approach. And that's the sort of thing which people will
gravitate to.
And you then become an expert, because you're providing value, you're providing commentary.
I completely agree with that. So, you know, it's almost like putting yourself into the shoes of the customer and thinking, what is it if I lived in this area? And a lot of agents do live in their local areas. What is it if I lived in this area would interest me? Yeah. What do I want them to know? What do I want them to feel?
And ultimately,
to feel like I'm knowledgeable and I'm the person that they should go to, because I am the person that is real estate in this area. It's really hard. You know, there's some people that still don't get that. There was one newsletter that I pointed out when we did Digital Transform last year. There's a guy, I think his name was Kendall. I think he works for Better Homes in the US, but he had this newsletter that was really great called Kendall's Best Buys. And so I think he's a listing agent and a buyer's agent, because you can have both sides over there. But what he would do is every week he would send an email around to his database with what he would say was his 5 best buys in the area. Now, that's relevant to investors as well as people that want to live in the area. And it was brilliant because it wasn't just the properties he'd listed, but he'd elevated himself above the crowd by saying, okay, everybody, I've had a look. I've studied the form guide, if you like, and here are the best buyers in the area.
And they weren't necessarily all his own either, were they?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is they weren't all his listings, but he'd elevated himself above the pack to make it look like he was the guy that knew all of it. I think that's a really good strategy rather than just putting your listings in an email. Like if you think about email marketing, really make it useful. Like what do people in the area want to know? Text messages, we've talked about that, really good for millennial buyers. Video SMS is really hard to ignore. Like if someone sends me a video, and we've started doing that this year too, we've just quick thank you videos and stuff like that. There's a couple of clients we've got that as soon as the magazine hits our office, because it hits our office a couple of days before we send it out, that, we do a quick video to show our clients their ads. And they're only quick and dirty videos, but they really appreciate it. You send it by text. And as soon as someone sends you a video message,
it's hard to ignore them in your messages box, isn't it?
It's really hard to ignore that play button. Yeah. Picking up the phone, I still think picking up the phone is to people that are perhaps older. There is nothing that beats a human conversation. The only thing is make sure, of course, that you've got something worthwhile to say. A couple of our guests have pointed out some cool tools that you could use as well, and this is a bit of a wrap-up of the year, I guess, is that, one tool that we've used is called Lemlist, and that's for cold email outreach. So if you've got a bunch of email addresses, I wouldn't ever recommend
Never buy an email list.
Yeah, don't ever buy an email list. But there are ways of getting people's email addresses, like if you've got email addresses from LinkedIn and things like that, and you want to add them to your email list, there's this really cool tool called Lemlist, which actually allows you to create GIFs and graphics and things like that to actually personalize the email. So, and really great tips on cold outreach emails. I've been following them for the year. We've played with it a couple of times. It's very, very cool. It gets a good response because it is personalized. So that's something I would definitely look at. And by the way, if you think we're going really fast on the links, don't worry. We'll do the usual, won't we?
They'll all be in the show notes.
That's it. Yeah. So there's Lemlist for cold outreach.
One of the things that we've also started using, we've mentioned before about how to capture emails. How have we implemented capturing emails on our own website?
Well, we use a tool called ConvertBox. It's a really excellent tool, by the way.
If you look at eliteagent.com and down the bottom of the website, you'll typically see a subscribe bar. That's ConvertBox. Or if for getting the action guides for the podcast, that's
correct.
also
that's also ConvertBox.
Yep.
So, and we've tried a lot of those over the years. We've tried Opt-in Monster. We've tried all the Sumos. We've tried everything from ActiveCampaign and MailChimp and those things, but nothing has worked quite as well as ConvertBox because it's light, it's fast.
And it integrates into your CRM as well, so that it will dump all the information in there, and then you can start off your automations once the emails are received. I mean, that's one of the important things you need to do is once you do get somebody's email address and they've let you into their inbox,
must send a welcome email.
And a thank you email.
Yeah, so the welcome, do you know, like most people's open rates, I mean, I know ours is a bit above the norm, I think, but sending a welcome email is probably the most important email that you'll send, because if your open rate is 25 or 30%, which is good, actually, your welcome email is actually usually above 50%. Like it's the one email that
people expect to receive.
People expect to receive. So if you don't have a welcome email, that's definitely something to put on your to-do list.
Yep.
Postcards, like you don't want to be sending postcards that are just thank you postcards or something like that. You don't want to be sending postcards that are typed because they look very impersonal. But there was this tool called Punt Post where you can put a message onto the card, but it'll format it so that it looks like a human has written it. And they're very, very good. So that's something to have a look at as well.
So social media, what's worked in 2019?
Images. So again, Facebook is sort of saying no to text, like, the top and bottom bars, but you must remain 20% below. There's a really good tool by somebody called the Light and Airy Photographer. So if you've had Instagram envy, Instagram grid envy, they say in the Facebook feed, I mean, when you run it through that no fill do filter, you want people to stop. People are scrolling.
And
so
scrolling faster and faster and faster these days.
Yeah, so it's what is going to be thumb stopping. Often it's the color of the image. One trick is to up the contrast. That's a really easy thing to do, like go into your favorite photo editor and just make the whole thing brighter. And on Facebook, use particularly purples and greens. They really stand out. But yeah,
or even on your phone when you're using it, just going into, I know for the iPhone, go and edit the photo and then just dial up the HDR. That will just make it all a lot more brilliant.
The Light and Airy Photographer, so that's using some Lightroom filters. So you'll need to download, I think, Photoshop Lightroom on your phone. The filters themselves are $39. They're dead easy to use. And basically that just dials up the light. So if you've taken a photo of someone's living room or something like that, or their backyard where it's a bit dark. The Light and Airy photographer filters are brilliant. Box Brownie, like there is no excuse for bad photography. Like you can send something off to Box Brownie and for $5 or $10 or something rather, depending on what you want done, they'll fix it up.
Yeah, so a photo of a cluttered table, we've had photos that have been edited in the podcast room, so removing keyboards and drink bottles and so forth off the table, and it just comes back magically cleaned.
How many times have you said to Box Brownie, clean that desk?
Straighten that hair.
Yep.
Give the shirt an iron.
Yeah, we've done all of that. They're brilliant. So there's a few tools that we use for images on social media. So remember, most of our images on social media come from our website. So we make sure that those images are all on point by using tools like there's a few of them. There's Canva, there's Snapper, there's Stencil, and Relay That. And we're big on the images, so we use different things for different reasons.
But it gets back to what we were talking before about the CRM side. You need to use what's going to be appropriate for the purpose.
We're a magazine, so people expect us to have brilliant images. I don't think it's too different if you're in real estate because, look at the quality of images that you see on Airbnb these days.
Yep.
I reckon they've all had the Light and Airy filter put over them.
Yep.
But, Stencil, for example, I love Stencil because it integrates directly into WordPress.
Yep.
So instead of trying to download an image from Getty and then resizing it and then
cropping it, making sure it all looks the right size. Yep. It takes all the guesswork out of it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And optimizes it, and it improves your efficiency in being able to get the content out.
Yeah. Relay That is a lesser known tool. Like I love that one because that will do everything from banner ads to social media images, and you can upload all of your brand assets once and it just resizes everything amazingly, does an amazing job. And of course, Snapper is a good one. All of our podcast images are created with Snapper. You can even go and rip off our template if you want to. It's on there. But I would say with your social media images, what works, what stops thumbs, keep text minimal and to the point. Make sure that you understand the channel that you're advertising in.
Yep.
So something that works on Facebook may not be quite right for LinkedIn, may not be quite right for...
You got to know your audience, who you're actually sending a message to.
Yeah, you've got to have the context right on the platform. I mean, even Gary Vee, he stopped swearing on LinkedIn. For someone who said, I'm just going to be authentically me across all platforms, he's actually authentically himself now on TikTok, Facebook and Twitter, I think, and Instagram, and now not so authentically swearing on LinkedIn. So
but he knows what his audience is going to be expecting on that platform.
Live video is still, something that is getting a lot of attention from everyone from Facebook Facebook will always favour live video over recorded video. Yep. LinkedIn likes video now. LinkedIn are doing live videos as well. YouTube as well. If you're on YouTube live video gets more attention. Interestingly, we've got a podcast coming up with Adam Franklin from... Well, he's a consultant and he talked to us about LinkedIn. What's getting more traction on LinkedIn is PDFs.
Really?
They're getting more reach than anything. And I think really interesting, going back to when Tim Ferriss was at ARIC a couple of years ago, he was asked the question, what is the best social media platform to be on, or what social media platform would you be on if you wanted to gain reach? And he said the one that everyone else is not on.
Yeah.
And so you think about, the number of agents on Facebook, that's probably a bit of red ocean there versus blue ocean. LinkedIn, kind of blue ocean still.
So how would you use PDFs on LinkedIn? Are you talking about sort of neighbourhood reviews, or how would you use the PDFs on LinkedIn?
A suburb report or something like that. Here is a suburb report. Here's what's going on in North Sydney right now. Maybe even like a calendar or something like that. The night markets are starting up in December.
Yep.
The Channel 9 building's open for business.
Yep.
Like that sort of stuff. I'd be doing that. And that really surprised me. The ones to watch, I think Snapchat for the young things. I mean, my Generation Z daughter is always on Snapchat. Her whole life is on Snapchat. And TikTok is actually one to watch as well. So, obviously, if nobody's on there at the moment, but, after asking my daughter, I said to her,
she looked horrified, didn't she?
What is this TikTok about? And she said, I can't believe you just asked me about TikTok. So I got on there and put in #real estate, and there were a lot of real estate agents on there, mostly American, mostly young. The note-taking app. So this is something that Gary Vee started. So you don't always have to have these brilliantly nice images to create content. Sometimes he just creates quotes on the Note app on Facebook, takes a screenshot of it, and then uploads it, and there's some content. And then you can tweet it and you can do a bunch of other things with it.
And using the content in multiple ways.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of stuff on social media. Twitter, for example, Twitter as well. We didn't talk about Twitter. Stories are still hot everywhere. So I think we're getting more reach out of our stories now than we are out of just posting photos to Instagram. So make sure, you up your stories game.
You have to have a little bit of a blend there. You have to have the mix. You can't just go all in on one particular channel, or do you think there is some validity in focusing on a particular channel?
I'm glad you asked that question, because it sounds like we've talked about a whole lot of stuff, and I believe that you should focus on two. Yeah. If you think about all the forms of communication, all the ways that you can meet people face to face. People might consume your content via text, which is a blog or a newsletter. They might consume via video, which is recorded media, or they might consume over a podcast or something like that, which is just pure audio or on the phone.
Yep.
And so if you think about those 4 methods of communicating with people, I actually think you probably need one in each quadrant that you need to focus on, one that you're good at, one that you're going to stick to. And then you need to use remarketing. So, for example, at the center of any strategy, I think, needs to be your website. What you can do then is when you pull people from social media to your website, you can do something called pixeling them, like a Facebook pixel or a Google pixel. So you bring people to your website, and then once you've pixeled them, then you can remarket to them in other places. So you want to pixel them with Google and Facebook and then remarket to them on other people's websites. And it makes you appear like you're everywhere, even though you're not. So you could run amok doing all these things, but I suggest you pick one in each thing that you're good at. So you might pick LinkedIn on social media. You might pick calling people. You might pick direct mail or email as another thing. But then make sure that each time you do one of those activities, you're dragging people back to your website and then remarket to them on Facebook and Google.
Yep. The important thing there is when you are dragging people back to your website, that's where you've got control over how you're communicating. You're in control of the narrative.
Well, then I would do everything possible to get an email address, at least, and add them to my personal audience.
Absolutely. We've spoken a lot about the social side of things. Community marketing, what is working what has worked in 2019 from community marketing?
Yeah, I just think keeping it simple. And often it is really just the simple things. Like you can focus on one good deed per day. See someone in the street struggling with a pram, offer to help.
Yep.
That's the simplest thing, because a lot of people will just say, oh, that poor person, they're struggling.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be difficult.
Yep.
It just could be, just go help. Community groups, you can get involved in plenty of those. I mean, some great information on referral marketing in the podcast that I did with Tara Bradbury, who set up her business from scratch. She talked in detail about how she set up her referral network using community groups. So it could be anything from the gym to the Mothers Club to the school to whatever. She is the go-to person for real estate. Even though all she does is property management, she wants to be real estate in Hervey Bay. She is the search engine. So people don't necessarily type into Google to find out something about real estate in Hervey Bay. They seek her out and they ask her. And then she says, well, okay, I don't do that, but XYZ is very good at that.
And that's where your referral network comes into it.
And that's where your referral network comes in. Obviously, the usual ones of engaging with charities and sports teams and things like that. We've just seen an amazing example of that with Kylie Walsh with her drought drive from Di Jones. So, that was a really amazing piece of work by her, rallying the local businesses to get people to seek them out to support drought relief efforts. And so you can, obviously you can go small, which is just go and open a door for someone, or you can go big. And, obviously she's had a lot of media exposure for doing, but the thing is the media love a good news story. They love a bad news story, but they love a good news one as well. I can remember very vividly those 2 girls who helped that guy with cancer. They set up a GoFundMe campaign so that he could pay his rent up in the Northern Territory to pay his rent. Do you remember the shark woman?
Yep. Rescuing the shark out of the Cronulla, wasn't it? Cronulla swimming pool.
Yeah. It is really easy to get good media exposure and to get well known in the community just by doing good things. The only thing is I would
do it for the right reasons.
Exactly. Don't do it for the publicity. Do it because you're a good person.
But I think, so something which you need to keep in mind is what is it that you want to add value to? There's so many opportunities to be able to think about what is it that will be really useful for myself, it's likely it's going to be useful for everybody else. For example, there's one of my pet ones that I've loved for years is hold a shredding day in the car park of
cleanup day.
Cleanup day. So secure document disposal. And that's where then you can send something around in your letterbox drops as saying, on the Saturday, come in for a sausage sizzle, bring your documents, get, so Shred-X or whatever it is, one of those, big secure document disposal companies. They will probably end up doing it for free because they'll be end up, sort of being a bit of advertising for themselves as well. So there's multiple ways in which you can do these community engagement events.
Yeah. Think about how you can bring people together in something that they will find useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So a lot of this surrounds getting the message out, and everyone says you got to become a blogger. What are your thoughts on blogging and writing?
I think it's still everyone thinks they can't, because writing is so difficult. And you and I both know that coming up with content every day
it's a muscle.
It's a muscle, yeah.
You need to exercise that muscle.
Yeah, but you don't really need to. Like, this whole podcast has come from somebody asking a question. And so if you were going to implement ConvertBox or something like that on your website, then why couldn't you ask questions? Or why couldn't you go through your email and have a look at what questions people have asked you in the past and then just simply answer those questions? And you can answer those questions on video, or you can answer those questions via writing an article. It depends on who you are.
Typically, if somebody is asking the question, or if multiple people have asked the same question, they're the brave ones that have actually opened their mouth and said, this is something I'm curious about. It's likely that other people are curious as well.
Yeah.
So take that as a lead for content creation, is answering questions that you're getting asked rather than thinking, what should I be writing about?
Yeah. And if you want a real ninja tip on how to write stuff, this is something I often do is I think about the answer to a question. I record myself like Danny Crane. I turn the iPhone recorder on and just record what I would say to the person if I was speaking to them. And then there are so many transcription services around which are pretty good. Descript is one of them that we use all the time. In fact, we've done podcast editing in Descript. It's so good. Download that recording, stick it into Descript, get it transcribed, export it into Word, and then edit it.
Yep.
Yeah, and you've almost got a blog post right there.
It's a lot easier to be able to speak your thoughts on your mind rather than sitting down in front of a computer, and typically fingers are a lot slower than what you're typing.
Yeah, and then, of course, think about how you repurpose it. So, if you've got a longer post that is on, let's say, on your website, then shorten that post, give us a summary and put that on LinkedIn, and then say this post originally appeared on X, and that's another way to drag people back to your website.
Absolutely. So any final tips? What we've been talking about is an exhaustive list, and as I said before, we'll be capturing all of the links and resources in this in our action guide, but what would your final tips be on this? My final tips, there is never a final, but here you go. Like if I could, tips for today. Yeah, if I could summarize what we've been talking about. So we're trying to get people into the top of the funnel that will perhaps move some prospects down to the middle of the funnel that will end up in paying customers. And we've been talking about that through the medium of digital marketing. First of all, number one is know who you're talking to and run them through that no, feel, do filter. So who do you want to attract into your business? What do you want them to know? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do? And let that drive your marketing. Put it on a sticky note, put it on your screen, and whatever you're writing, go through the no, feel, do. No, feel, do, always. That's my top tip for everybody. Secondly, the thing is, you don't realize that you don't have to be everywhere, but there are some things that you will like doing and some things that perhaps won't come as naturally to you. Out of the 4 quadrants, recorded, face-to-face, text, and audio-visual, pick 1 or 2 in each segment and get really good at those, and then employ remarketing to make it feel like you are everywhere, and repurpose whatever you can. So if you've written a blog post, think about repurposing that for LinkedIn. Think about sharing it on Facebook. Drag people back to your website and then remarket to them. But also, I suppose, keeping in mind who your avatar is and who you want to be speaking to. Yeah, and come up with something that's on brand for you, like Kendall with his best buys. Be the real estate agent that people look up to for information about all real estate in the area. So that's one thing, is let people come to you. So don't go buying lists. Use some clever tools to cold outreach and get their permission to market to them. Because if you're just shouting at a room of people and no one's listening to you, then what's the point? You're actually better off talking to people that want to talk to you. And lastly, have some solid systems to capture that data. So think of it in terms of you
might have a mail system where you want to communicate with people, get people and names into that mailing list so that you can move them through the funnel. Don't think that getting a business card or something like that, that's not a solid system. I would grab that business card, I'd connect with that person on LinkedIn, say, really nice to meet you, I'd love to keep in touch with you on LinkedIn. Generally, when they connect with you, that will reveal an email address, then ask for permission to keep in touch with them.
Absolutely.
So, make sure that those systems are solid to capture data, have a welcome email, then we sort of move on to the customer journey, which I think would be a topic for another podcast.
Absolutely. Look, I think we've covered a heap of ground here.
We have.
It's been a lot of fun.
Are you going to come back?
I will.
Excellent. Excellent. So don't forget to download the action guide with all the links and things like that in it. Also, if you want us to just send you all the action guides from all the podcasts, then you'll need to get onto Extra.
Yep.
If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, please hit the subscribe button in iTunes. We would super appreciate it.
That's it, folks. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
See you soon.
To connect with all things Elite Agent, including the latest news, coaching and features, subscribe at our website, eliteagent.com.